there are two ways in which you can actually use these topics and knowledge in your answers. One is, suppose UPSC asks these topics directly in your paper. Say for example, UPSC is asking you to write about, examine the sociological point of view, or examine how heat waves create social inequalities or perpetuate social inequalities in India. In that sense, you can write about heat waves, right? You can write these perspectives that we discuss in the class. The next method to use these knowledge is, suppose you are writing a question related to Marxian concept, right? UPSC have asked a theoretical question. Now there you can add the perspectives that we discuss in these topics as example there. So these topics that we discuss, either it can be used directly in an answer, or sometimes it will have to be used indirectly as an example to substantiate the point of view you write in theoretical questions. Clear? Say for example, if you are asked to write about the concept of anomy of Durkheim, we have discussed about the concept in artificial intelligence. So there you can give example of artificial intelligence when you are explaining anomy. Clear? So this is how you need to use the content. See, one thing is very clear. When you want to score good marks in sociology, it's not just about having in-depth, very broad content. Okay. It's also related to how you are effectively using whatever content that you have. That is very, very important, because most of the time students have this tendency to actually, learn more and more and more and more content, but they don't know how exactly to use these content in your answers. So you know everything, but your answer is still empty. The reason for that is you have learned the content, but you don't know how to use it, how to place in your answers, how to, what I've seen is there are students who have scored really good marks with limited content because they know how to place these content effectively in their answers, right? Once you learn that technique, once you understand how to use your limited knowledge in most of the answers that you get, then you will start scoring good marks. You will not start scoring good marks when you start increasing the content. It happens only when you start to understand how to use this content in your answer. Clear? You got the idea? All right. So don't just try to learn the content, instead also understand how you can use it in various topics. Clear? So now first we will discuss about heat waves in India. Now we are going to discuss it from a sociological point of view, and first we will discuss various sociological analysis, or how to view it from a sociological point of view. Now how can you view heat waves from a sociological point of view? So we are going to discuss this topic, heat waves. All right. How can you connect, or how can you think from a sociological point of view? I want you to do that exercise where first you have to think from various social institutions, then various social groups, and then various sociological perspectives and theories. Okay, let's start. You don't have to rely just on the content that is written here. Okay, you can also generate content, because this is just few of the topics that we have listed here. You can also add diverse topic, dimensions from your end as well. So think from various social institutions. Okay, heat wave is a disaster, right? It is considered as a natural disaster. It usually happens when the temperature increases from the normal level, and it can create extreme levels of conditions like drought, right? And that drought-like situation can happen, as well as it can lead to destruction of agriculture, right? It can also impact people's lives, how they socialize, right? It can also have impact on the social institutions of people, right? It can have an impact on family, it can have impact on marriage, stratification. So think from those angles. Yeah, sure. You can think from different classes angle. Yeah.
Like lower class people affected
correct.
Because upper class any kind of accessibility again poverty lower class
correct. Yeah. So first point that you can mention is regarding the class angle. So here we are dealing with the stratification, right? See, one more thing that you need to understand is whenever you are thinking from the social institutions, you shouldn't give that name as headings everywhere because it will be repetitive. Suppose you are writing an answer, your subheadings will be stratification, family, politics. You shouldn't give it like that. Instead, whatever point is, whatever point or that dimension that you are trying to explain there, give that heading. Say for example here, instead of giving the heading like stratification, you can mention about how it will impact the class structure, right? In this way you can give different headings and it will not be repetitive, because if your headings are repetitive, then the examiner will understand that you have some kind of framework within you and you are just trying to fix every, put in every topic into that framework, so it become very obvious, right? So instead of that, you have to specifically mention the dimension that you have found out by thinking through that framework. Clear? So here in this case, class structure. Now you can mention about, here we have mentioned about that of, you can also try to think about intersectionality, right? Kimberley Crenshaw brought the concept of intersectionality. What is intersectionality? Yeah. Yeah, because when it comes to that of disasters, right, you need to understand that the impact of disasters are different for different class of people, as well as within that class itself, the impact will be differential for people based on their gender, based on their caste, etc. So that is how intersectionality as a concept become relevant here. So intersectionality, right? So you have to mention that class, gender, caste, etc. have differential impacts when it comes to that of heat wave. So those belonging to lower class, those belonging to lower caste, those belonging to or those who are female will have major impact compared to other social groups. Clear? Because as mentioned here, when it comes to class, you have to understand that the upper classes have accessibility to various tools and gadgets or facilities, like say for example they can fix air conditioners, and that way they can actually escape the higher level of temperature, right? So they don't get affected because of heat waves much compared to that of people belonging to the lower class, right? Because they cannot afford an AC or air conditioner. Is it clear? Now again, when it comes to women, what you need to understand there is, when it comes to women, they are responsible for taking care of the health of people within the household. So in cases of heat waves, especially when the care requirements of women increases, it will be an extra burden on women, right? Suppose they have to take care of the elderly, because elderly will get easily affected due to such disasters. So women's care responsibility increases and it will be an extra burden on them. It will increase the time pressure on women, because already they are involved in household chores and they have limited time left for themselves. Now with increasing disasters, the time pressure on women will further increase, right? So you have to think from various social groups. So instead of going into the institutions, we are now thinking about social groups. See, there is nothing like you have to think in a particular order and your answers should be in a particular order. This is just a framework that you can use to generate more content, right? This will be kind of a link, right? Because when in most of the practical situations in an examination hall, if you are not thinking within a framework, or when you are not using a framework, your thoughts will become so random that you will find it difficult to bring in more points. Now if you have some kind of framework and a systematic way of generating content, it will be easier for you. Alright, so social groups, gender, where gender you can mention about time pressure on women because of increasing care responsibility, as well as you have to mention that in such cases where there is instances of heat wave, right? It can cause crunches in economic resources that the lower class already have. Now that will again lead to a situation where girl children will be left out of school. Because when families' income reduces due to such disasters, they will not send their girl children to the schools or colleges because they will try to save resources and instead they will be spending on education of male children. Right? That can also have an impact on education of women. Is it clear? And one example that you can mention here is about the gate cane weddings. Have you heard about the concept? Gate cane weddings. See, gate cane weddings are mostly in the, it takes place mostly in the Marathwada region because due to heat wave situation, agricultural laborers will have to work as cane cutters. Okay. Now, for cane cutting, mostly the contractors, they prefer couples. Okay. So, they pay for couples. Now, in order to have a couple or in order to have a spouse, they arrange a quick wedding. Right, that wedding will take place in maybe 1 or 2 days. There will not be any elaborate celebrations or anything. Very few people will be attending the function and that wedding will take place. Now, soon after the wedding, what they will do is, as a couple, they will go to these cane farms and they will work as cane cutters. Now, thing is, why do they do this? It is because these contractors will pay 1 lakh rupee as advance for this couple. The contract will be for say 1 year or 6 months, but they will get advance payment of 1 lakh rupees. So during a disaster, when they have limited resources, this 1 lakh rupee is kind of a respite for them. As a result, they try to get married as soon as possible. As a couple, they will join that cane fields and they will get 1 lakh rupee in advance. So whatever they spend on marriage will be less than 10,000 because it's a very low key function. As a result, the spending on marriages will also be less. The remaining amount, so say for example they get 1 lakh, 10,000 rupees they spend on wedding, remaining 90,000 rupees will act as a kind of savings or revenue for that family. And what happened because of gate cane wedding is, it is also leading to a situation of increasing instances of child marriage. Okay. So just imagine heat wave, a disaster can also lead to increase in instances of child marriage, especially in this situation because they want to get married fast. If they do not get a legal age bride, they will go for child marriage as well. Is it clear? There is also one more reason why child marriages are increasing because both father and mother will be going as cane cutters. So they don't want to leave their adolescent daughters alone in the home. So that is also one of the reasons why these kind of child marriages are increasing in case of gate cane weddings. It is because, see, that term I think came because I've read that this marriage takes place related to that farm, right, cane farm, and gate cane weddings because right before they enter that particular cane farm, they are getting married. So it's like, they are getting married and straight away they are going to the cane farms for cane cutting. So I've read that is one of the reasons why this particular term has come in. Okay, gate cane weddings. Clear?
Sir,
Yeah, please tell.
Sir, institution of marriage നമുക്ക് water bride പറയാൻ പറ്റുമോ?
Institution of marriage, water brides, yeah, that can also be mentioned because of limitations or like kind of lower availability of water will also push such kind of weddings. That can also be mentioned. Okay, so that is the impact on gender. Next. Yeah, economic crunch and migration, that can also be mentioned because when heat wave situation happens, it will also increases migration because as they are not getting any income from the rural area or village, they will have to shift to cities to get livelihood. That can also be mentioned. See, you can connect it with various dimensions, right? There is no limit for that. Migration, gender issues. Then another point that we have mentioned here is regarding that of farmers' issues. When it comes to farmers' issue, that is having a class angle that is related to that of works and economic life. You can include it in different topics or rural and agrarian social structure. Now, when it comes to agrarian class structure or social structure, it will lead to proletarianization of farmers, right? Why? Because mostly these kind of instances affect the poor farmers, especially small and marginal farmers. Because when it comes to large farmers, they have enough resources to sustain even during such kind of crisis. But small and marginal farmers, they might already be in debt, and when such instances happen, their debt will increase, and it will also lead to instances of farmer suicides. Clear? Now, this kind of suicides are anomic suicides according to Durkheim. Right? So, rapid changes or disaster related suicides, you can mention it as anomic suicides. Clear? Okay. Then also you can connect it with the topic of alienation. Right? How it will lead to alienation? Because social ties will become weakened, right? Because of these disasters. Especially heat wave kind of situation will lead to social isolation, and crunches in resources will also lead to increase in social conflicts. So overall, those who are subjected to, especially those belonging to the lower sections of society who are subjected to such kind of disasters, will feel alienated. They won't be able to participate widely in the society because they do not have any resources. They will be socially isolated because of the heat wave condition, right? Economically, they are also again feeling a set of issues. So overall, they will be feeling self as well as social alienation. So that can also be mentioned. In general, people will feel alienated because these heat wave kind of situations will create psychological issues in people, right? Because these oppressive weather, increase in temperature can also cause psychological issues. So all these together, you can say that it causes alienation. See, water rights means like in order to, because in those areas where it is drought stricken, women will have to go long distance in order to collect water, right? So in order to increase the number of people who are there to collect water, mostly marriages take place in such situations, right? And that instance we refer to as, like, they are referred to as water rights, because the sole purpose or the very important purpose of that marriage is to collect water, to have more people to collect water. Clear? Now, next is we have to discuss the sociological perspectives associated with heat waves. Now, what are various sociological perspectives that you can think of related to heat wave? What all can you mention here? Apart from the perspectives that I have written here, any other perspective? Women are, okay, from a feminist perspective, you can say that women are overburdened during the disasters. See, when it comes to overall disaster, you can use this framework there as well. Because whatever points that we have discussed in the first part related to the sociological analysis, that is same for most of the disasters, right? Regarding that of class, regarding that of gender, because mostly disasters affect women more than that of men. Especially if suppose such disasters lead to displacement of people, women will face even sexual harassment at the camps, right? Women's menstrual needs are not met when they are shifted to the camps. So a lot of issues, and when it comes to that of pregnant women, they will also be facing more issues. So whatever disasters that you are trying to explain, in all the disasters you have to mention the gender angle, because women are more subjected to issues than men when it comes to disaster. Okay, class angle, it is equal for every, or same for every kind of disaster, whether it is flood, whether it is landslides, whether it is heat waves, because the most affected people are mostly those belonging to the lower class. Because you have to understand that most of the disaster prone regions are occupied by people belonging to the lower class. Right, higher class and middle class people are comparatively safe when it comes to their disaster exposure. You look into the coastal communities, right? They are prone to get affected by disasters such as tsunamis, cyclones, etc. They are belonging to the weaker sections of society. They belong to the lower class, right? When it comes to hilly terrain, it is also mostly occupied by the disadvantaged sections of the lower class. And these elite terrain have the risk of landslides, right? Various other issues are there. So most of the disaster prone areas are occupied by the lower class. As a result, you have to also mention class angle. So you can create a framework for disaster related topics where you can mention these kind of stuff like class angle, gender angle, right? Instances of attacks against women, marriage, right? When disaster happens, it can either lead to increase in certain kind of economic marriages, right? So for example, drought-like situation will lead to increase in marriages for water brides, right? When it comes to heat wave kind of situation, for cane cutting, gate cane weddings. So likewise, you can connect it. Clear? Now, when it comes to sociological perspective, feminist perspective, there you can mention that women and their burden increases, especially during disasters and disasters like heat wave, because care responsibility of women increases, right? Educational opportunities for girl children reduces, and they will also get subjected to various kind of exploitation due to, say for example, gate cane weddings. Now, these brides, they are mostly getting married because they need or they will be taken to work in cane, fields, right? And for their work, they will not get any payment because the entire advance that they receive from the contractors will be appropriated and utilized by the groom and their family. Clear? So that bride is directly taken for unpaid work. So that is also from a feminist perspective an issue related to heat wave. Then, when it comes to that of environmental sociology, the idea of Robert Bullard is known as one of the prominent figures when it comes to environmental sociology because he studied about the exposure of environmental risk to different types of societies and social groups. According to Bullard, the exposure of disaster risk is differential for marginalized communities. He mainly studied about the black community in US and how they are exposed to disaster or how their exposure to disaster is much more than that of exposure to disaster for the white community. Because he identified that most of the landfills are situated in black neighborhoods rather than among the white neighborhood. So his concept of environmental sociology can be applied in case of heat waves. Because in heat waves also, as we have already discussed, the impact of heat wave is different for different sections of population, especially the marginalized sections are those who are greatly impacted because of heat wave. Clear? Are you able to follow the point? Right? Now, next is subaltern perspective. That is also similar to that of the environmental sociology because subaltern perspective deals with the marginalized section. So, according to subaltern perspective also, disasters are more discriminating as well as the impact or the intensity of it is more on the marginalized sections. Then, when it comes to Ulrich Beck's risk society, see, Ulrich Beck mentions that when it comes to modern societies, modern societies are continuously engaged in managing risk, which is caused by industrialization as well as globalization. That is risk society. That term or the concept of risk society means modern societies are greatly engaged in managing risk which are created due to industrialization and globalization. When you look into the climate change, right? We are continuously managing climate change and the reason for it is industrialization. Right, we identify the reason for global warming to that of industrialization and how our environment was polluted during that process. Right. So Ulrich Beck say that whatever problems that we see now and whatever problems that are affecting various social groups are nothing but created by industrialization and globalization. So heat waves can also be connected to the same aspect. Right. So Ulrich Beck says that even heat waves, right, can also be considered as or can be connected with this concept of risk society. Then, disaster capitalism by Naomi Klein. Disaster capitalism is a Marxian perspective where Naomi Klein mentions that basically disasters are utilized by the corporations in the sense the companies, as well as the governments across the globe for increasing the profits. Because heat wave kind of situation will further boost the sales for air conditioning, right, air coolers. So mostly they say the neoliberal policies in the modern societies are helping the capitalists to increase their profit and to take advantage of various disasters. Right, so that particular concept can also be mentioned here. It can also be applied in all other kinds of disasters that you are dealing with. Right, because mostly disasters, if you look into disasters, there are various aspects to it. When supplying materials to disaster prone areas, when supplying materials to those who are affected by the disasters, in all these aspects, the private sector or the capitalists are able to increase their business as well as to increase their profit. Even though they try to create a kind of a false consciousness that they are helping out the society, but in reality, these businesses are also gaining because of disasters. Clear? They might not get affected, but they will be gaining from the disasters. Clear? Apart from this, can anyone point out any other perspective that we can add here? Proletarianization, yeah, you can mention Marxian theory. From a Marxian perspective, disasters will lead to proletarianization. It increases inequality in the society. Then, any other perspective or any other concepts that we have learned? Capitalist greed that has led to climate change and heat wave. Yeah, you can mention that. Then,
ഫെമിനൈസേഷൻ ഓഫ് പോവർട്ടി പറയാൻ പറ്റും.
feminization of poverty. Yeah, you can mention. See, you can mention it in a feminist perspective, right? You have already mentioned it in feminist perspective that regarding unpaid work, right? Gay cane weddings. So that can be connected with that. Apart from that, you can also mention about the dependency theory, right? Because whatever the causes of underdevelopment of developing countries is because of developed countries, right? So the reason for these climate change, the reason for all the climate related issues and these natural disasters are largely associated with the developed countries and industrialization. But the problems of which are actually suffered or the sufferings are for the people belonging to developing countries, right? Because in US or China or whatever industrialized countries, their activities has led to extreme cases of weather condition, right? And that extreme cases of weather condition are actually affecting people belonging to developing countries. So dependency theory can also be mentioned here. The reason for underdevelopment of developing countries is the inequality as well as concentration of resources with that of developed countries. That is what the dependency theory mentions as a whole. Clear? See, basically, dependency theory mentions that the reasons for underdevelopment of developing countries is because of the concentration of resources and exploitation by the developed countries, right? So, in that perspective, you can connect heat waves because the reason for heat waves and climate change is because of the activities by the developed countries, but the problems and sufferings related to that is actually affecting people belonging to developing countries, and it is also impacting development of these countries, right? Because agricultural, crisis will happen in these developing countries due to heat wave situation, right? So people as a whole, because see, heat wave you have to also consider it from a larger perspective. It is not just the people who are directly affected by it, but the people belonging to the entire country will be affected because heat wave kind of situation will lead to loss in agricultural productivity, which will lead to increase in agricultural prices, right? And such increase in agricultural prices will affect various social groups in the society. So likewise, you have to understand that. System is okay. How can you apply systems theory? How will you connect it? Okay. Is affecting other, but when it comes to systems theory, mostly we mention it from a positive angle. You can mention it, but mostly we mention it in the form that changes in one system will lead to changes in other parts of the society. But here that connection will be difficult, right? Because this is not change in one part of the system. Okay. Clear? Any doubt, anyone?